Well, good morning to you. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm glad we have a good amount of time dedicated to this conversation.
Yes, it's a very exciting moment and great to be in Davos. It's a lovely place, despite the logistics, I must say.
A bit slippery at times, yeah.
But, I think so much happening in where we stand today.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with that. I've been in Davos only a couple of days, but we've already, I think, really centered around the theme for this year, which is one, again, of a massive question mark. It feels like, once again, we're talking about uncertainty in the global macro environment, certainly a lot of uncertainty in the geopolitical environment. How are you feeling about 2026?
Well, first of all, if we look to the forecast for the economic growth of the, world economies in 2026, set by the IMF at 3%, which is good. I think 3% is a good number, as a global economy growth. However, as you know, we had a very rough start of 2026. There are so many things going on, mainly in the geopolitical side. But we know that geopolitics drags economies, and so it's something to watch. But however, I must say, the world economy has been so resilient. So if you look at the 2025 numbers, I think things went on very well despite the pressure on the world economies. So you see interest rates have been reduced, in line with the performance of the U.S. economy, as the U.S. economy is doing very well. Equity markets did extremely well, although there are some overvaluations and some correction will be welcomed, for the equity markets.
We can pick up on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And oil prices held very well. Energy prices held very well. The precious metals grew like hell, as we know. So things really, despite everybody is conscious and thinking like things are not in good shape, from a political perspectives, the economies, they were so resilient, and so even our region, especially about the Gulf region.
Are you expecting more of that then this year?
As I said, geopolitics is still, the picture is not so great, as we know, and it's getting worse. It's not getting any better. But and we'll have to watch, how the economy will respond, because usually, when you have situations like this, especially for us, and we watch energy prices very closely. So supply demand becomes an issue, and when there is, lack of demand, lack of growth, lack of demand, then oil prices will become under pressure. This is something concerns us the most. Although, Qatar is a bit different story, because we're going to start our expansion this year. So the first train of our expansion, LNG expansion, is going to start this year. So, it's going to compensate for any expected, drop in oil prices.
Yeah, let me pick you up on the geopolitics, specifically with Qatar, and how Qatar weathered the various storms last year, because twice Qatar was a target in the region. And I wonder what impact that had on the economy.
Guess what? Last year, number of visitors in Qatar was a record number, 5.1 million, almost twice as our population. So again, this is one of the sectors. Economy did very well. We announced our 9 months GDP. Our 9 months GDP grew by 3.4%, 5% from non-hydrocarbon, only 0.3% from hydrocarbon, and the sectors which contributed to that growth, 11%, from the hospitality, 11% growth in the hospitality sectors, tourism, also logistics, 5.5%, and again, in the logistics also, I must say that last year was a good year for logistics through Qatar. Qatar Airways, cargo business grew by 17%. Qatar Airways, cargo business is responsible for 7% of the total cargo business of the commercial airlines in the world, and it's number one. So, and these are the sectors we're focusing on. And so when we say 5% non-hydrocarbon growth, this is better than the growth we put for our national development strategy of 4% a year.
Yeah.
So we are going in the right track, as I say, despite the pressure in the geopolitics.
Yeah. You said you watch the price of oil closely. So do I, by the way. A question for you then on, this range that we're in now, because oil obviously was down, 17% throughout the course of 2025. a $60 to $65 range, what does that mean for the region as a whole?
I mean, still it's around the $60. Last year it closed with around $67 as an average for the full year. With $60 is fine. We put our budget for 2026 based on $55 a barrel, which is conservative in my opinion. And with $55 dollars a barrel, we should record a small deficit of $6 billion which is less than 3% of GDP. So, but again, that's going to be compensated by the growth or the expansion of the LNG. And the first train of that expansion is going to happen in the fourth quarter of this year. And we are adding, 85% to our current capacity, which is going to make Qatar the largest, exporter of LNG in the world. And so we have 8 mega trains. Each one is 8 million tons. The first train is going to be live or going, today. End of the year.
End of the year.
Quarter, yes.
Given the geopolitical landscape, geoeconomic fragmentation, does that open up potentially new markets for Qatar's LNG?
Oh, yes. Qatar LNG was mainly going east, so looking to Far East Asia, India, Pakistan, now, Europeans, they've been talking to us because to diversify their source of LNG, especially after the Russia-Ukraine war. So some of that is going to Germany, is going to France, and we have signed deals, with the countries, and we see more potential with the Europeans, although we have some issues, I think I must say, especially when, with the regulations, sometimes, there was, the Corporate Social Responsibility Directive, CSDD, I think we have mentioned it in many occasions that, this could affect, our contracts with Europe. However, we understand that Europe now is really taking an easy stand in that one, and that should resume our talks,
Needs must, I suppose. I watched His Excellency, your Prime Minister, with his fireside chat yesterday, World Economic Forum President Joumanna. And one thing he said about the economy, I actually took note of the line. He said, energy is our strength and power, diversification is key, and technology will power the future, which I think probably gives us an idea of the 3 prongs that approach the economy from your ministry, from the government. So energy obviously is going to be a key pillar for growth going forwards. Why the focus on diversification as well if you have this massive boon coming through?
No, diversification is very critical for the GDP because we don't want to be over-reliant, in energy, going forward. We know that LNG is the transit energy, and it's going to be there for some times. However, if we are to build a sustainable economy, we should not be dependent on a single sector. So definitely, growing the other sectors, creating jobs, creating businesses in Qatar, and then, having contributions from other sectors and the diversification, and not to be over dependent on a single sector is very critical. We are talking more about sustainability, future generation. And that's why really, I may speak from a Ministry of Finance perspective. For example, we have built, a medium-term fiscal policy framework for the country. This is something we have developed over 4 years, and we have seen, the impact. And what happens, we take different view in the economy for the next 20 years, and it can go beyond. Different scenarios, we look optimistic scenarios, pessimistic scenarios, worst-case scenarios, from a revenue perspective, from oil prices, from, even from economic sectors perspective. And then, based on that, we forecast our spend and our budget while investing in the economy, but in the same time being disciplined, and efficient in other issues with the spend. So we have this view, and then we decide on the surplus. So there is a surplus. We know exactly what's going to happen to that surplus. How much of it goes to Qatar Investment Authorities for the future generation, to create an intergeneration equity? How much of that goes to central bank to enhance the reserve of central bank and to build resilience, in our monetary policies? How much of that it goes to settle debt? And to say about debt, Qatar debt, went down from 58% in 2021 to 41%, and as a result, we got a double A. We got upgraded to a double A, where we are the highest rated country in the region, and better than among even many more developed economies. And also, some of that money on the surplus goes, we call it for a stability fund. That's under the control of Ministry of Finance. Basically, so when we have a bad year, we don't have to go and borrow, just to support the budget. So, and we are being very disciplined in the following this fiscal policy framework. So very important, as I say, this complete the pictures with the economic diversification, His Excellency the PM was mentioning in the interview. So we have to really work, and more important, as I say, we should not think about today, we should not think about tomorrow or the after tomorrow. We should think 100 years from now.
Yeah.
And sustainability is the key issue. And that's why diversification is very key point for sustainability.
So the past couple of days in Davos, there's been a lot of focus on global yields and what's been happening in many bond markets, from JGBs to U.S. Treasuries. How do you see the borrowing conditions evolving this year?
Well, we did very well, I must say. We just recently we have launched, small debt, $4 billion, $1 billion, traditional 3 years bond, and $3 billion sukuk, 10-year sukuk, and it was issued with the tightest pricing in the region and probably in the world, or a dollar-issued, bond, only 20 basis point, over the U.S. Treasury, which is very, very tight. From our perspective, as I said, we're announcing $6 billion deficit, so probably we'll need to go to the market, and basically maybe we need to also to refinance some of our obligations this year. But that's, again, dependent how we see the oil prices and how is the performance of the economy over the year. So borrowing conditions is excellent, I think, for a AA rated country. And again, we're not so big, in terms of borrowing. We stayed away from the market for 4 years. And I think, many creditors, many banks were, wondering, say, why Qatar, 4 years didn't do anything. But I think it's very important to be active and take advantage now from the low interest rate environment. And also, to create the benchmark for the Qatari corporates, Qatari banks, as they go to market, and manage the yield. It's very important.
One of the stories we were talking about yesterday was the fact that the Danish pension fund announced that they were not going to reinvest. They were going to start selling their U.S. treasuries. As a finance minister, I'm sure you have to take note of that and the potential implications international investors selling U.S. treasuries could have on currencies that are obviously pegged to the USD.
Of course, I think we need to look at it, carefully. Qatari Riyal, is back to the dollar. And, a lower dollar is not good for us, because that means it will put pressure on our imports and create inflation in a way. But we are very much diversified. I don't think, when we look to our position, in terms of like exposure, we don't have a huge exposure to the specific currency. We are diversified. I know central bank, for example, recently they went big in gold, and thanks God, gold is doing very well.
Thanks God or thanks someone else?
So, but again, we'll have to watch. See, there are two things. We have to be, I know, Danish selling U.S. treasuries, I don't think it will change the picture in a big way. But we have to understand things. First of all, most of the major commodities are denominated in dollars.
Yes.
And this is not changing in the near future as we see. This is one thing. The second thing, the U.S. economy is doing extremely well.
Yeah.
And the growth there, especially, in the sectors like AI and so on. And as long as the U.S. economy is doing very well, and as long as major commodities denominated in dollars, okay, you'll have maybe a weaker dollar for some period of time, but I don't think this is something that is going to stay for a long time.
So you don't think there's legs for this so-called de-dollarization trade that people were talking about last year?
We've been talking about this how many years now? De-dollarization, and
But the dollar did end the year 10% weaker last year.
And don't forget one thing. I think very important. Weaker dollar sometimes is a target for the U.S. Treasury. So they want a weaker dollar. And they talked about it all the time. So and it will help. The U.S. trade, of course, at some point. But I think, as I say, as long as there's two elements in place, I don't see there is a big change, in the picture.
Yeah, I mean, also the other perspective is that a weaker dollar in general benefits emerging market economies. So there's also that to think about when it comes to countries.
Yeah,
like
I mean,
Global
yes,
South.
tourism and so
Yeah.
on, and for your exports, but our exports is in dollars, so it's doesn't matter because it's mainly LNG, so it's a dollar denominated, exports.
Yeah. From a finance ministry perspective, Qatar has big plans also on AI development. How are you sort of setting aside capital, thinking about your budget in years to come, and what is going to be really a national priority for so many governments around the world?
Yes. AI is the key business sector I think everybody has. It's changing the way we live, it's changing the way we think, it's changing the way we do business, it's changing the way we grow. And it is no matter how much we spend time, to talk about it, this field is growing like hell, and every day you are behind if you don't catch up. In many ways, you don't catch up, from knowledge and again from a business. And in Qatar, we know this, and technology is one of the key pillars of our diversification strategy. Mm-hmm. And we have built our national digital strategy, which was recognized by the UN. And that's based on that strategy, we're going to add 40 billion riyals to the local economy by 2030 and create 26,000 jobs. But more importantly is the AI. The AI is a big element of this, and we have a national AI strategy. Our national AI strategy is, in my opinion, has the threefold. First of all, is to invest or to continue to invest in the AI businesses and to bring the AI businesses and the startups and in Qatar. And we have announced many programs for this, like Startup Qatar, mm-hmm. which is the 1 billion riyal, and most of that money is already gone. Also, we have, some programs done through Invest Qatar itself. Invest Qatar itself, and which is announced also $1 billion for investment in these funds. Qatar Investment Authorities, they announced $1 billion fund investments, and this is basically to bring the big players as well as the startups, on the AI to come and start a business in Qatar. So this is one element, what we're doing. The second element is the human capital. Is really building the human capital that really, can drive the AI business, mm-hmm. as well as importing, not importing, but attracting talents, in Qatar. And the third, element, we're doing this is the application of AI. I think Qatar has, key advantages in certain fields. Aviation, for example, energy, as we talked about. And I think we can build a good story, in the AI in these fields from the applications. While I think when we talk about AI, so many people talk about Qatar, data centers, because you have mm-hmm. the energy, the proximity. Data centers to me is like, investing in a bond. Yes, it makes sense because you have a constant income and an offtake from the big players. But more importantly, I think not the data centers, but, although, the new cloud makes a good opportunity beside the data centers, because this is, I think, it's going to be the new game, coming in the AI. And we plan to be, active in the new clouds. But more importantly, I think the application. Unless the AI becomes part of your DNA, I don't think you have an AI strategy. And we don't want to end up becoming an AI buyers. We want to be an AI creators.
I just wonder, because again, so many numbers are being thrown around capex investment, and when you're coming up and you're formulating your national strategy and putting all this money into AI initiatives, what's your time frame for return on investment? How long are you willing to wait to see whether this is actually monetizable and whether these projects are going to be successful?
We don't look at it. We believe in the AI. This is going to be the game changer. We had many revolutions in the past. We look at the telecom revolutions, the megabytes, the gigabytes, and we believe the driver, the next revolution is the AI revolution. So it's not something that you are going to spend money and get the money back next day, unless you are investing in data centers. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an easy, investment. But investing in the AI is something you're going to get by. It's going to be part of your daily, monthly, yearly GDP of the country. So this is investing in the future, and we have to be a main player, not, as I say, a buyer of the technology, a buyer of the AI technologies, because you're going to have AI technologies ready to be sold, but we don't want to be a buyers. We want to be a creator.
Do you think Qatar will have a competitive advantage in that space?
Oh yes, oh yes. We are. I mean, it's all about people, education. I think very important, and Qatar is a leader in this. And again, investment. Again, the vision and the leadership, and we have all of that. And this is at the heart of our diversification journey. So, and AI is really. I mean, we want to make it clear, and I think we are in a good position. You've been to Qatar many times. Joumanna yourself. You saw the infrastructure in the country. You saw the setup there. You saw the people, and I think we are in a good position to play an active role there.
Let me bring it back to where we started, which is you made a comment about perhaps a bit of exuberance in certain pockets of the market, maybe around some of those AI stocks. So how do you square the two together, the long-term vision and perhaps the short-term exuberance in markets?
I mean, of course. I mean, I'm not talking about the .net and .com, eras, before where, I think so many people, at that time they went investment and went with some gimmicks. I should say gimmicks, at some points. So you had companies do not exist. Their valuation was reaching billions, we're not seeing this today, although some of it exists, but in reality, I think most of the AI, valuations and everything most of it is for real, but there are some gimmicks. I'm sure some companies, if you go there, you'll find them like operating out of their garage or something, and maybe they're worth $1 billion in the stock. But the overall equity market, in my opinion, is overvalued. And it's normal. I mean, you cannot see a market growing by 20% for 5 years, 6 years. And economies is not growing at the same speed. So, this is the rule of thumb, I call it.
Yeah.
So some correction will happen. Will happen. But, I think what we need to watch is really, the commodities, especially the precious metals. I think this is something to watch. And, these things grow during crisis and during geopolitical tensions. So they are growing in tensions, and we see more of that. So I think they will continue to grow, in my opinion.
Just out of curiosity, when you're setting your agenda for the year, where do you expect to devote the largest portion of your time? Where are you going to be spending your attention and focus this year?
Well, I think we need to spend our focus mainly in the economical growth. Mainly, I would worry about the energy prices. This is extremely important. But I think, my opinion, geopolitics is going to be occupying us, and tensions and trying to resolve it. And Qatar, we played a big part, to resolve tensions. However, things are not getting easier, as we know. So this is my biggest worry. As I say, as a finance people, we deal with consequences of the geopolitics, and we have to plan it sometimes. Yes, plan our risk management plan, our backup plans. But at the end of the day, I think my biggest worry is the rising geopolitics globally and in the region.
In the region, yeah. Well, maybe we'll get a little bit more signs as to what the geopolitical focuses are going to be later today when President Trump speaks. Just to round things up, what are you most excited about this year, looking ahead to 2020, other than Qatar Economic Forum? Because that's an easy one. I'm not going to let you say that.
Well, I think, as I say, there are good news. I think the growth story is still very solid. We look very closely to the international analysts, IMF, World Bank reports. Things looks good. There is a positive, and we have to be happy. I don't want to make it a black picture, because, to be honest, the world economy has been very resilient.
Yeah.
What we have. Can you imagine the pressure we went through for the last, 2 or 3 years? Russia, Ukraine, crisis here and there, and despite all of this, economy is still growing, resilience is there, still, GDP impact. Although, it's not equal, maybe some regions, the US is doing very well, maybe Europe is still, figuring out, how to get out of this, But, the GCC region is doing extremely well, and very resilient. So the overall story, really, we should be happy that, despite all this pressure, COVID and whatever, we are where we are, and we still are growing, and we're still achieving some good growth, energy prices still at reasonable levels. Everything, inflation is under control. So there are good stories. As I say, the only worry here is the geopolitical is becoming more and more. It's not.
Yeah, you can't ignore it.
More problems are being created than being resolved. So I think that's the worry, I should say. And but despite all of this, I think the view we should be very happy that things are not going to be as bad from finance, from economy. Again, I'm reading from analysts.
Yeah.
Probably the analysts, they will be so busy because every day there is something new.
Well, I think that's a good place to leave it. And probably there will be something new to talk about tomorrow, for sure.
Absolutely.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Joumanna.
Just a final reminder to everybody that you can continue this conversation on social media using the hashtag Qatar Economic Forum. And again, we hope to see you all this year in Doha for May 12, May 14. I will be there and we'll be having lots more conversations like this. Thank you so much.